Canadian family earns. It's about $43,000 a year. So who would turn down for an $1,100 investment and a forever return of $6,600 more in your pocket? And then they actually have a lot of surpluses because they have really high skills and moderately high jobs in terms of what they demand. How am I doing for time here? Oh, we're great. This is the Mount Pearl distribution, and you can see there's no immigrants in there's no immigrants in Mount Pearl, so we don't get anybody there. You got a few of those high school dropout men, and then all of the action is there in these mid to high level 2s or low level 3s. And so what the literacy industry should be delivering in Mount Pearl is fundamentally different than what the delivery should be in Toronto. Okay, so now I'm going to summarize, and then we can have a discussion about how crazy we are for doing this. For this crowd, these are self-evident, but I can tell you that the people that work in Industry Canada and in the Federal Department of Finance, and even in HRSDC that's supposed to be about human capital, they don't believe some of these things. So part of it is changing people's minds for people that are in power. The first is that skills matter to our economic and social success and what we get for our tax dollars. Machines don't do anything by themselves. It's people using machines that generate productivity. It's self-evident, but it's not widely appreciated. From my reading, there's urgency to act because of these changes in the global economy and what the consequences. I've focused on the positive consequences of higher GDP, but there's a whole set of negative consequences. If we don't fix this, China is going to eat our economic lunch. Jobs are going to flow out, and it is highly questionable if we have the skills to get the replacement jobs that are going to maintain employment levels and incomes in Canada. That said, there's a big fight about who should pay. Currently, finance at the federal level, I keep pointing to them, say there is a problem, it matters economically, the differences in literacy we've identified across countries explain over 55% of the long-term differences in GDP growth in the OECD countries, something like $12,000 a person, those differences are, from the countries that realize the highest growth to the countries that realize the lowest growth. But what they haven't admitted is that government has a role in fixing the problem. What they admit to themselves or assert is that individuals and firms need to be the ones that invest to fix this. So the implication of this is they're not likely to write you a check for whatever that was, $1,700 per person to fix the problem, unless we get leadership of the Obama type. So there has to be some different approach. And my approach is to try to get local politicians and firms to use information to realize that they have a problem. As a gratuitous aside, lots of people in the room have been working at this for 35 years with not much success. And I'm generally a pathological optimist. In this case, I'm not. Until recently, the banks and the insurance companies in Canada have finally figured out that this is hurting their bottom line. You don't have to know very much about the Canadian political economy to know that if the chair of Sun Life or the Royal Bank goes to the government and says, we have a problem, you need to fix it, it gets done. So I'm actually cautiously optimistic, where I haven't been for a long time. We know that the problem isn't going to go away by itself. Canada invests, I think we're number 3 now, but for a long time we were number 1 in the amount we spend on initial education, primary, secondary, tertiary, post-secondary. So we spend a lot, and the presumption of the politicians has been we're spending so much, there can't be a problem of skill. Well, it turns out that there still is. Even though Canada ranks is sort of 1, 2, and 3 on the average quality of kids leaving the secondary system, about 43% of kids leaving high schools, either as graduates or as dropouts, are at level 1 and 2, where there aren't going to be jobs. So step 1 is what Peter Calamai says, turning off the tap into the bathtub. We have to fix the quality of K-12 education. And so by implication, that means investing massively in adult skills. Because if there aren't enough kids in there of very variable quality, and the immigrants we're attracting have high levels of formal education but low levels of essential skills, particularly oral fluency and literacy, we can't count on that as the solution. Our economic analysis said if we could fix the problem, the net costs are enormous. Our current estimate is something like $40 billion at the national level to fix the problem. But the benefits would be massive. The estimate is something like $100 billion more in earnings and significant reductions in unemployment insurance, in health costs, in workers' compensation costs, and in social assistance costs. And so governments facing tight times should be paying attention. The programs need to be designed to match the market segments we've identified. And so practitioners need to pay attention and make sure things are tightly aligned. If we talk government into being, well, if you get the money from government, they're going to want accountability. So you need tools to monitor learning gain and to justify your returns on investment. So the cost per point becomes paramount. And government is actually a pretty nice client to have because they're willing to put up with a not great performance. But if the problem is in people who are largely employed and you're selling to firms, they're going to want to see that return on investment and have proof. So it changes the game. And that means for you as an industry, you got to do what other industries do. Think about your levels of capitalization and scale, about research and development, about productivity, and for human resource development of the people working in the sector. Something that the volunteer sector has gone through, something the child care workers went through, but my sense is that the literacy industry, if I can call it that, has yet to go through and think seriously about curriculum accreditation, the match of their products and services. So, our gentle contribution, web-based tool offering real-time flexible assessment and instruction, the segmentation analysis that say who has the problem where and what the economic costs and benefits would be, and then these community report cards. And that's where everything is. And if you go to there, www.dataangel.ca. Right now there's a report card for every community in Ontario, and within the next few days there'll be a report card in English for every community in the country, and then next week there'll be report cards in French for every community. The reason they're not all available, some of you know when I was at StatCan I had an army of people to do this stuff. Now I don't, and we're self-financing this. This is not something that anybody's paid for. It's something we did to try to make the world a better place. And unfortunately, that means going a lot slower than I became accustomed to at StatCan. So thanks for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And one last thing. Next week, the segmentation analysis for the province of Alberta and the province of New Brunswick, the two most forward-thinking jurisdictions in Canada so far, will come out. So you'll be able to see that full analysis on demand, supply, shortages, who has the problem, how big's the problem, what would it cost, what would it yield. Questions?
That initial investment that you outlined in terms of costs for raising literacy levels, invested per learner or in total?
No, that's in total. And our weaselly way of describing it is we got experts together and said, here's what the segments, what characterizes them in terms of their learning needs and their characteristics. Said, what would best practice do with somebody like this? And that allowed us then, they told us that learning mode and the class size and the supports needed. So we got cost estimates that we know are big enough on average to help people that look like that. Any given person, any given program may be more expensive or less expensive. The idea was to get a good estimate of how much on average so that you knew if you were going to fix the problem, you had enough money to do so. And it doesn't include the costs of upgrading the sector, like training more instructors or building new curriculum, or we assume that all that money is already in the system. It's just maybe not being spent on training literacy instructors. It's training chefs and early child care workers and that sort of stuff. Yep. Pauline?
It would, I mean, I work for the government, so I know there's not billions of dollars about to be allocated to adult ed. I don't think that's a shock here. But it seems to me if the large mass, there's such a large proportion who are in that, high level 2, level 3, and they have enough skills, certainly enough life skill functionality, that many of them would be good candidates for independent learning, or if they were, if there was more information. Many of those people don't know they have a literacy gap, right?
Yeah.
They don't realize that they're at this and they should be that. They don't realize that they're at risk. If they knew that, and if they also were given some strategies, you want to improve your reading, read more. I mean, that's very trivial, but
Yeah.
it seems to me that gives a good candidate for independent or developing some strategies to improve. The same way I would have to improve my French
Yep.
if I wanted a high level career in French. I'd figure it out if that's the goal I wanted.
Yeah.
It would bring those costs down.
Yeah, the wrinkle is where my head's at. This is sort of off the wall, but the only way it's going to work is if you actually deliver through the workplace so that the employer is creating the incentives, because it's in the employer's long-term interest to fix the problem. The convincing individuals is a really tough road, especially when most of them have been successful for 50 years. And all right. The second thing is the Brits have had great success doing this kind of embedded training, so literacy and numeracy upgrading, but embedded in health and safety education. And wrapping the pig in the blanket of health and safety seems to make it way more palatable for employees. Where if it's, you got low skills and we're going to fix you doesn't really elicit warm and fuzzy and high participation rates. Yep.
If you keep talking about the government, unless you said the government just don't have the money and they're not going to do it. So I know it's a mess up. But we should be targeting the schools. And I think that's not what we're doing. And I know we have to fix the problems that they're now. But we should start right down in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Like the teachers, like when I went to school, I went 9 to 4. And if I wanted to learn skate or swim or music, it was done after 4 o'clock.
Yep.
The teachers now have to take the children swimming and skating to the parks and everything. So what's left in the day for the
Is-
academic part?
Yeah.
So what we're doing, we don't fail students, we push them through. We get students who are graduating in grade 12 and 13 who can't even read. And math, forget it. I mean, they're terrified of math. It's frightening to see them.
Yeah.
And we're getting math for secondary level. We're absolutely terrified of math.
Yep.
And so I think where we got to start, now I know we have to fix the problems out there, but we have to start.
We have to start there, but it's not enough.
Yes. And like parents today, the children start school, they're in it one day. This week they're in the mornings, next week they're in the afternoons. Parents are so confused.
Hmm.
Get it, they're in
Yeah.
mornings or afternoons or all day.